So this guy seems to have a pretty big following. Um, yeah. Somebody had suggested it. I decided, hey, what the heck? Let's give it a try. And so here is a video by Wendigoon. It's one of the most dangerous cults, uh, as he suggests, the most disturbing cult of all time, the Anthill Kids, which I would not doubt my ex's family is a part of because I know for 100% fact, without talking shit, they're part of a cult. I just have no idea what the hell it's called, what it is, but yeah, it scares the living shit out of me for my daughter's sake. So, um, yeah, let's see what this is about.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Wendigoon, and today we are talking about the Anthill Kids cult. Now I want to get this disclaimer out of the way. One of the reasons that I wanted to do this video separately from the religion and cult iceberg is that there is a lot of heavy material in this. I'm not going to show any pictures of it, I'm not going to be unnecessarily crude, but I am going to say exactly what happened to these people, and I'm not going to pull any punches. I want to bring light to this not only to emphasize the horrors that these people went through, but also as a sort of cautionary tale for the atrocities that some people are capable of. I also want to mention there's this cool podcast called Cults, who I listened to in preparation for this, and not only this story, but several other stories. They go much more in depth with the psychology and the background of it, whereas I'm mostly going to be talking about the events of what happened. They talk about everything surrounding it as well. Their link will be in the description if you're interested in that. Also, as you could imagine, this is the perfect video to get demonetized, so I am very proud to lead you into and to announce our first sponsor. Fame, money, women, or guys if you're into that. What do all of these things have in common? That's right, hairy men. I mean, look at this guy. Do you think he could have been like the fourth president of the United States without that sick mane? Or this guy. I don't even know who he is, but he looks cool. I'm sure he did something. You know why I know he looks cool? The hair. And I know what you may be asking, but Wendigoon, all of my hair is falling out. How can I be as amazing and powerful as these old people? But don't worry, friend. I'm proud to introduce our first sponsor and the help to all of your problems. Keeps. Is your hair thinning and that bald spot becoming more of a reverse bowl cut? Well then Keeps is just the product you need. Keeps isn't just some gas station pill that's supposed to restore all your hair overnight, but ends up just giving you a nosebleed. And unlike most prescription hair loss supplements where you have to go into a doctor's office and have a very awkward conversation in order to get what you need, Keeps lets you talk to doctors directly from your own house who will get you started on the treatment that works for you. Like look at this guy. Got rid of that old yee haircut, and now look at him, absolute Chad. Or this one. You think he was bringing home them females? Or males not judging? From the club every night before Keeps? Nope. But afterwards, he is one smooth operator. A lot of people ask me what I attribute my success to. With all of you wonderful viewers watching, how I'm able to grow so quickly at such a blessed rate.
I don't
And some
understand
people
it.
think it's the dedication.
First thing they do is blame Hollywood. No, it's not always Hollywood. It is documentaries that are not Hollywood. Jonestown Massacre. I know there's more. Um David Applewhite's Heaven's Gate. Um, Charles Manson family. Um, Shit, the list could go on and on. The Hollywood will make a movie of it, but no, it far before Hollywood touches it. Not just because I'm an actor and my standing up for Hollywood. I'm not a Hollywood type. Even when I go for our theatrical release, I'll never be a Hollywood type. I'm I know for a fact, working in the music industry, I could stay grounded, and I'm gonna stay grounded when I make my debut on these two films. So it's not Hollywood. You can't always blame Hollywood because a lot of people do, and it's not always fair. Not as well, yeah, terrible. But did you know? I can't remember who the last president was, but how they used to heal certain sexually transmitted diseases was they would take a shaved down whalebone and they would stick it, no better way to say this, in their pee hole and almost use it as like a plunger. It's like, what the hell were you thinking? I don't know if you guys also heard this too, but some very interesting news. You guys might have already known this because I had no idea about this. But the home in which Benjamin Franklin lived in London or England, they found 200 plus bones, some which were children, some which were young adults. They're starting to believe he was a serial killer. And he was what they considered famous for his time, like one of the first celebrities. So, a founding father, also masquerading around as a serial killer. I'm going to go on a limb here and say Jack the Ripper. Wait, did they live around the same time? I kind of want to look. Hey, Google, when was Jack the Ripper active? It's not going to tell me. Hey, Google, who is Jack the Ripper?
According to Wikipedia, Jack the Ripper was an unidentified serial killer active in and around the impoverished Whitechapel district of London, England, in the autumn of 1888. In both criminal case files and the contemporaneous journalistic accounts, the killer was called the Whitechapel Murderer in Leather Apron.
Hey, Google, Benjamin Franklin.
I don't know, but I found these results on search.
There's that one. Hey, Google, who was Benjamin Franklin? I know who he was, but...
According to Wikipedia, Benjamin Franklin FRSA January 17, 1706, OS January 6, 1705, April 17, 1790, was an American polymath who was active as a writer, scientist, inventor, statesman, diplomat, printer, publisher, and political philosopher.
Yeah, he was too...
look for the link in your Google Home or Google Assistant app.
He was far, born before Jack the Ripper. So I just wanted to make sure.
To which Samuel, as you can imagine a 2-year-old would not stop crying. As punishment for this, Roque then ordered a man by the name of Guy Vere to punish Samuel. Now, all of this information I'm talking about has been described by members of the cult who have survived, and what their tellings of it have been in recent years. So there isn't exactly a single diagnosis we can pinpoint. However, it was general consensus that this man, Guy Vere, was very mentally handicapped. Furthermore, family members of Guy before he left for the cult have added on saying that yes, he was mentally deficient. And while we may not know specifically given the time that all of this occurred, it's generally understood that Guy had trouble understanding things and was not the person who one would ask to discipline a child. And during his punishment of the child for crying, Guy Vere killed the 2-year-old Samuel. In an attempt to hide the body, Roque ordered that they burn the body of 2-year-old Samuel, which it didn't really work, so they then buried it near the commune. As punishment for this, Roque then castrated Guy Vere. Guy Vere then died of his injuries, to which he told the entire cult to tell the police that he was killed by a horse. See, at the time, these people are still interacting with the town around them, so whenever Guy goes missing, that would be suspicious. So the cult then goes to the local police department, says the guy was killed with being trampled by horses, which did make sense to the police at least because there were horses on the property, and that Samuel was killed, to which they tried to cremate the body. Obviously, the police were hesitant of this, especially since everyone else in the cult seemed very quiet, except for their leader, Roque. However, as psychiatrists would go on to state later, Roque was able to charm the pants off of everyone he talked to. So much so that one psychiatrist who interviewed him at this time said that Roque is a completely safe man, and in a later case said that Roque was capable of housing the children that were under his care. Furthermore, after all of this came out, after all of what I'm about to talk about was said and done, this same psychiatrist believed Roque so much that they still professed that he was a good person and was not responsible for his actions. It really goes to show what attributes a master manipulator can have. So while the police wanted to charge him with something, Roque was able to talk them out of a real investigation, and the charges were dropped. However, during this time in which they were awaiting trial or awaiting to see what charges they could press, Roque, as well as several of his followers, were in jail. During this time, which was just shy of a year, the followers that were not in jail set up a house just outside of the jail so that they could come and speak to Roque and the other members every day. As soon as Roque got out of jail, he convinced all of the members to leave, to which they did, to an area known as Burnt River, Ontario in 1984. At the time, there were 40 members, which is counting his 20 children. Also, different signs of the cult began to shine through at this time. For example, all of them, except for Roque of course, had to wear matching tunics as a way to show their unity or whatever. It was really just another way to further dehumanize the group of people. See, this stair-step effect kept happening. Whenever they first joined the cult, Roque told them that they were not allowed to talk to their friends or family, as that will maintain a worldly connection to which they cannot separate themselves to God. Now the signs such as the tunics are getting more evident. However, if you're a member of the cult, it seems like a natural progression. While at Burnt River, Ontario, the cult made their money by selling local goods and foods to the people of Burnt River. This included things like maple syrup, preserves, smoked fish, all sold under the moniker of the Anthill Kids. It was at this point that Roque really doubled down on the authoritarian thing, to which he began drinking violently and set up rules such as members could not have sex with each other and even not communicate to each other without Roque's permission. This meant that all communication and all form of open thought had to be funneled through him. It even got to the point where he started hosting things which he called gladiator tournaments, in which members of the cult had to get into a dirt ring and fight each other until he called forfeit, which left people with several broken bones and noses. Before we get into the really hard stuff that he did, I kind of want to bring up a concept that I think is important to understand why things like this can happen. For those that don't know, there is something called the frog in the water concept. If you've never seen it before, which I wouldn't blame you, whenever you go to cook a frog, you don't have to kill it, you don't shoot it or stab it or anything like that that you would a traditional meat animal. What you do is you take a pot of water and drop a frog into it. The frog will get comfortable in the water and sit there, and all you have to do is periodically make the fire a little bit hotter. As long as you don't jump up too much at once, the frog will continue to sit there in the hot bath. You can do this again and again and eventually get it to the point that the frog boils to death without jumping out, because you were slow enough and it didn't realize there was a change. Whereas if you take a frog and try to throw it in a pot of boiling water all at once, it'll immediately jump out. And this same concept is exactly what happens to a lot of people in these situations. See, it starts out as, I want a separation from this life. I want to do something better for me or God or my friends or whatever. So this guy's going to help me do that. Good, I should go with him. Oh, he wants me to not be attached to worldly pleasures? Well, that makes sense. I'll get rid of all of my stuff and my connections. Oh, he's wrong about his predictions of God coming back? Well, like he said, God's time's different than our time. I guess that makes sense. Oh, he led an event in which a mentally handicapped man killed a child and then he killed the mentally handicapped man? Well, that makes sense because he's a healer and then the child didn't understand that, so the child needed to be taught. So then the mentally ill man tried to teach the child, to which the mentally ill man then needed to be taught, and it all makes sense because he knows what he's doing, because he talks to God. And I want to emphasize that because a lot of people just kind of point at these situations and think, wow, how could anyone be so dumb? But in actuality, it's just the frog in the water. And even though it keeps getting hotter, and even though these people who are very logically thinking, if they would have seen this situation from a mile out, would identify that it's wrong, because they've been sitting in it, and because the water's just been getting a little bit hotter bit by bit, it's harder to recognize that they're boiling to death. So speaking of, we're going to get into some of the more extreme things that happened after this. As you can imagine, various members of the cult decided that they wanted to leave. At this point, it wasn't irregular for Roque to beat his subjects, at first with a belt, but then a hammer, and then the blunt side of an axe. And yeah, if someone decided that they wanted to leave, the standard procedure was to tie them to the ceiling, pluck all of their hairs out of their body, before Roque would defecate on them. In one instance, he had a member prove their worth to the cult by breaking their own legs with a sledgehammer. And he also did things to people such as making them sit on lit stoves, shoot each other in the shoulder, and even cut off the toes of other members to prove their own loyalty. Also, there was an imaginable amount of sexual abuse mixed in with this as well. This also didn't just stop as the adults, as the children had their own realm of hell to go through, as whenever a child was acting up, it was not uncommon for them to be nailed to a tree and had rocks thrown at them by the other children. Another thing that you've got to realize is that this happened over the course of several years, and something that's often seen in abuse situations of all types is something known as the honeymoon phase. See, like I mentioned, that charisma that Roque had never went away, and I'd imagine that his followers' belief in God didn't go away either. So essentially, this figure who was in their life, who said that he was a mouthpiece for God, who was extremely nice, caring, and charismatic to them 99% of the time, just had his weak moments. Or at least that's how they saw it. As we see it, and as I'm reading here, he would get belligerently drunk and then horrifically abuse members of his own people. But to the people living it, this is just a kind and nice man who has his bad moments. And that's normally how cult leaders trick people into continued subjugation. However, in 1987, one of the women recognized that while she may deserve what's happening to her, or while it may be for the greater good, she doesn't want this to happen to others. So one night during a blizzard, she left her 2-month-old child out in the cold to freeze to death in order to escape the horrors of Roque. Someone came across the body of this 2-month-old child, to which the police then investigated and began an actual investigation. See, the issue was Roque had registered the Anthill Kids as an official church. So it's not like the police could come in there with warrants, guns blazing, and just pull everyone out of the houses because of religious laws in Canada. However, what they could do was investigate the welfare of the children. So due to the investigation in 1987, all children were removed, leaving the cult as just Roque, 2 men, and 8 women. After the kids left, Roque got much worse. Whereas normally he would do a bad thing, apologize for it, be good for a while, and then do a bad thing again, there was a lot less good and a lot less apologies in the meantime. One of the first things he did after the cult left was castrate a male follower by wrapping a rubber band around his genitals, to which it eventually became infected and fell off. He also began doing things such as burning their genitalia with soldering irons and other completely unimaginable torture methods, and claiming that all this was because either they're not trying hard enough or God told them to. However, the final culmination of this came in September of 1988 with Solange Bolyard. I know I talked about some brutal stuff before, we'll be talking about some really brutal stuff now, so one last time to say it, viewer discretion advised. Solange earlier that day had complained of a sore stomach, to which Roque said that he could help her, to which he laid her on a kitchen table, took off her shirt, punched her in the stomach, and then put a plastic tube in her lower intestine, to which he then induced an enema using oil and molasses. Keep in mind, through this entire thing, he says he knows exactly what he's doing as he's a gifted healer. He then cut open her abdomen, pulled out a piece of her intestine, and with his bare hands broke off a piece and just tucked the rest of it back in before stitching her up. He also had members of the cult take a plastic tube, insert it down her throat, and begin breathing into it as a way to inflate her digestive tract. Somehow, Solange lived through the night, although she died in agony the next day. This did not stop Roque though, as he then said it was his job to resurrect her. And using a very butchered and horrific version of the Garden of Eden, he decided he was to do so with the seed of man. So he cut open her abdomen, took out her uterus, drilled a hole into her skull, and then had him, as well as the rest of the men in the cult, commit acts of necrophilia. Obviously, this didn't resurrect her. However, he pulled out one of her ribs and then wore it as a necklace, saying it was as Eve came from the rib of Adam and blah, blah, blah. Her body was then buried a short distance away from the commune itself. Keep in mind, at this point, everyone is experiencing extreme versions of Stockholm Syndrome. That includes one member by the name of Gabriella Lavallee, who had experienced her own abuse when, after complaining about a toothache, she had 8 of her teeth pulled, as well as the aforementioned solderizing and having a hypodermic needle broken off and being left in her back. After everything that had happened to her and after seeing what had happened to Solange, she decided to get out of there. In July of 1989, she attempted to make her escape. However, she was caught by Roque, who then took her inside, pinned her arm to the wall with a hunting knife, and then amputated her arm using a chainsaw. Finally, the nightmare ended on August 16th when Gabriella managed to make an actual escape on her second attempt. She went hitchhiking to a hospital just north of Toronto, in which even then she was apprehensive to report what had happened, saying that her arm had been broken in several places and Roque took care of her by amputating it. Eventually, the truth began to come out, especially when police, who ever since the children were taken away from the cult began to suspect something nefarious was going on, came to Gabriella and began to ask her about what really happened. When finally in August of 1989, Roque was arrested for 3 counts of aggravated assault and 1 count of unlawful bodily harm. He pled guilty to these and received 12 years in prison. However, as soon as Roque was taken away from the Anthill Kids at this point, they all immediately began to turn on him, or at least most did. This led to one of the members showing the authorities the body of Solange Bulliard, to which led to Roque having a second-degree murder sentence stacked on top of his current sentence, which gave him life in jail with the possibility of parole in the year 2000. However, he was never granted parole, as we'll find out shortly. Also, how I mentioned that most of the cult turned their back on him, well, while in jail, he was still able to father 4 more children with women of the cult who came to visit him during conjugal visits. This really shows the effect, or at least long-term trauma, that this abuser had on his victims. And also, if there's any question in your mind of maybe Roque believed his own hype, as I kind of had going into this, while in jail, he got in trouble for trying to sell his drawings and poems that he had written while in jail on a website called murderauction.com, which prides itself on selling memorabilia of serial killers. So yeah, I don't really think he cared. Finally, all of this ended when on February 26th of 2011, the 63-year-old Roque Thoreau was killed by Matthew McDonald while in prison. Matthew had been Roque's cellmate and had gotten really tired of Roque talking about the actions that he committed while a cult leader, to which Matthew took a shiv, stabbed Roque to death in the neck, went to a guard station, dropped the shiv off, and said, I'm quoting, "That piece of shit is down on the range. Here's the knife, I've sliced him up." This added a life sentence onto the life sentence that Matthew was already earning, and as far as I'm concerned, that should have counted as community service hours. The Anthill Kids has to be one of the most disturbing cult stories I've ever read, because at least with other stories such as Jonestown, yes, while the leader was malicious and evil and led it, there were still people underneath him that further pushed his mantra onto others and made it seem like there was more people who believed whatever he was spewing. And even with Jonestown, there were several members who, it was proven after the suicides, were trying to fight back or at least get away. Whereas here, it seems as if Roque maintained total control over them. It shows what happens if one malicious person is given the years and attention needed in order to start a following. And while thankfully the majority of the members of the Anthill Kids survived afterwards, there's no way to cope with the pain and trauma of what they saw. And my thoughts and prayers are still with the members of the cult who are alive today who had to bear these unimaginable horrors. But I want to highlight something in it that I think is important, that a lot of people overstep when they read stories like this. And that's Gabriella. Think about the position Gabriella had to be in. She not only had children with this man, but she was surrounded by his teachings at all times and literally lived for several years beneath his thumb. To which she then decided to break the cycle and escape, and she was horrifically punished for it. But then she tried to escape again. 1 month later, the willpower that she had to have to not only break that cycle of abuse, but after experiencing an extreme punishment for doing so, do the same thing again. And not only that, but her getting out and telling the police could have saved some, if not all of their lives. The reason this story didn't end like Jonestown with everyone dead is quite possibly because Gabriella tried again. And while yes, it is a horrific and evil tale, and it's interesting, as I always say, to look down the rabbit hole and see how bad it is, I want to also emphasize these pieces of light in the darkness. Because the world will always be an evil place as long as there's people like Roque Thoreau. But it will also always be a good place as long as there's people like Gabriella. And on that hopefully not so downer of an ending, thank you all for watching. This channel has gone places that I can't even imagine or really comprehend. I did a sponsor read at the beginning of this, and that's hard for me to even take in or process. And I'm blessed beyond all measure, and it's all thanks to you all. I'm at like 180,000 subscribers right now, and I remember whenever I did the childhood trauma video, I talked about how 10,000 seemed like an impossible number to me, and 10,000 still seems like an impossible number to me. And here I am now, and I can't believe it. Just thank you all so much for that. So thank you to everyone who watched. Thank you to all my viewers. Thank you so much to all of my subscribers. It really does mean the most. Thank you to all of my patrons, and a massive thank you to my top tier patrons. You can see their names as they're scrolling through here. Your boy, the real Cody, J-Bops. I'm just doing some off of memory. Oh, there's Honey, and there's Knights of the Round Table and all that. So hi guys, I'll start randomly just shooting out names because I appreciate you all. I really can't thank you all enough for giving me this opportunity, giving me this platform, because it's always been like a pipe dream of mine to get to where I'm at now, and now I'm here, and it's all thanks to you all. So I sincerely mean it from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. There are some very interesting projects on the way. I believe the next video will be the conclusion of Tier 7 of the Conspiracy Theory Iceberg, so stay tuned for that if you're interested. But above all else, just thank you for watching. I'm glad that you were a part of this, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye!
It has to take one very smart but sick motherfucker to be able to convince so many people to follow their reaction. I mean, either you're searching for something, you're missing something, you had a bad childhood, one of the above. And for some reason, you see it in this one individual as a fulfilling purpose, right? That's what I would think. I know I'll just lay off of her for a little bit, but the cult that my ex is in, yeah, they follow under the same type of predatory behaviors, except as far as I know, they don't do the shit that this sick bastard did. As far as I know, it still scares me, but wow. I mean, to be so afraid to turn in somebody because of what? Of retaliation? It's mind-blowing. It really is. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let's get into one or two more, all right? I'll be back.